Hey, Tripp Harrison here, Twiford Funeral Home in Manteo, North Carolina. Today we're going to be presenting the second video in our series, Places of Rest, where we talk about the different types of burial facilities, so to speak. We've covered memorial parks and columbaria and mausoleums. Today we're going to talk about a good old-fashioned cemetery. And this is a video that I actually enjoyed making because I've always had kind of a soft spot in my heart for cemeteries, especially older ones, because there's so much history there. And in a cemetery that's been around for hundreds of years, like the one we're going to explore today, there's just a lot of tales to be told and a lot of wondering what happened along the way. But they're really quite beautiful and very peaceful. So we're going to go today to Manteo Cemetery in the heart of downtown Manteo, North Carolina. And we're going to talk a little bit about the traditions and the different developments in burial customs throughout the last couple of hundred years. So here we go. In looking at this cemetery as a whole, you'll see just from a broad breadth look, you can see the many different types of memorial placement, memorials, monuments, markers, all sorts of things out here. Let's take a look at a few of them up close. And I'll try to explain a little bit about how grave markings have changed over the years. For example, here we're standing in front of the graves of a husband and wife. They are basically from the period, the husband here was born in 1845 and passed away in 1923. And here we see the wife apparently. And they made a much bigger statement in this era, in the late 1800s, about the connection with man and wife. You'll see most of these graves of this vintage will have wife of on the wife's monument, and sometimes they'll have sayings written at the bottom. For example, this one says, "God's soldier has marched into Canaan," and this her stone says, "Not gone from memory, not gone from love, but gone to her father's home above." Something, yeah, that's what that says. So you'll also notice that those markers face forward, but the actual grave space is below it. Now, in this period of time, they would bury the body, of course, and then they would put a cement slab over the top. That's not a common practice today at all. And some places would have even footstones, which is what we have here, which basically would just contain either a single initial or the initials of the individual that's buried there. So that's sort of an old school look. I also want to point out that these monuments are marble. Marble was very commonly used in this period of time. Marble has qualities that make it quite beautiful, but it's also a lot more fragile than granite. And I see that at some point in time, someone has lifted those marble stones and put a granite slab or concrete slab, I can't really tell what that is, maybe it's concrete, underneath it, so that when mowers come by and the weed whackers come by, it doesn't chip off of the stone itself. Let's take a look at some other ones. All right, this is a companion burial space for a father and mother, and here again we see father and mother on a stone, and the first names and dates of birth and death, and then the family name is underneath there. It's kind of difficult to see it because the grass has grown up just a little bit. It's early spring here, and the first mow of the year hasn't happened. So that's an interesting thing too. Going to move back here a little bit and see another one of the older ones. Again, marble. Now the one we just looked at was granite. So there's been a transition there in the construction of monuments from marble to granite. But we go back to marble here, and we see this is again the late 1800s, early 1900s, which was very common. Because burial was not only common, but just about the only final disposition chosen in the U.S. for so many years. We used to see a lot more variety in burial space monuments, and this one is one from mid-19th century, and it's sort of an obelisk, and it has the individual's name written there, and then on the side it will have the last name on both bottom corners, as you see here. And then out in front we have basically just a concrete cover over the grave space. So this was a design, one of the designs that were popular in this era. And there's something about this one that's very it's unusual, in that is it is an old grave marker monument, I should say, from an individual who passed away in 1899. This is a marble monument, and it's in excellent condition, which is not usually what happens to marble over the years. But this cemetery is very well maintained, and it's a tight-knit community, and everybody does their best to keep things super nice. But you'll also notice on even this old marker that, and I don't know if it's apparent in the video or not, but there's some symbols up here. There is a Mason square and compass, as well as a handshake above it. So a lot of people memorialize special fraternal affiliations that their loved one has when they pass away, because it was so important to them, and they believe that it's important to memorialize that. And there again, at the other end of the grave, is the footstone that just has the initials. Now here we see a family plot, which is a common feature in cemeteries even today, where either very obviously or not so obviously there is a barrier. I don't know if you can see it easily, but it's almost like a granite wall that goes around probably 30 feet square, and in the center is a beautiful granite monument that says the last name of this family, which is Lennon. And then there are spaces inside of this family plot for the individual members of the family. Even the ones that are still alive, they'll have a place to be. For example, this is probably the original group here. We see a birth in 1896 and a death in 58. This obviously looks like a husband, and then here we have some deaths 10 years later or so, and the rest of the family plot appears to be unoccupied. So in this case, what this usually causes a family plot to be decided upon is a family that is open and to discussing how their family should be memorialized. Sometimes it happens because an unexpected death of a younger person may cause the family to prematurely have to buy cemetery property, and they go ahead and purchase enough for the entire family to be with that lost young person when their time comes, even if it's many years later. So here we have some mid-1900 grave spaces, and you'll notice the cement covers over these. They were, again, just typical of this time. They're rounded on some of these because this is we're pretty close to the ocean here, and it just keeps water from standing on top of those graves and making a puddle and whatnot. Here again is another example of a family plot. You can see the outline of the family property is a little bit more distinguishable here, and we have some burials here in the front. We have the family name in the middle, and we see a couple of markers over there, gravestones, if you like to call them that, on that side. So there's already 4 family members in this area, but there's room for plenty more. Here's a very large family plot with the family name-stone in the middle, and then this one is quite big. It's about twice the size of the first one that we saw, and already has many occupants, but the other half of it appears to be unoccupied. So this is a generational thing. This could be a couple of hundred years before this gets filled with the members of this family. But what a great family tribute to have all those who have gone before them in one spot to be able to visit and reminisce. Another variation you'll see in cemeteries is the grave markers, like the ones we saw at the newer cemetery. However, these are a little bit older, and they don't have a brass plate on top. It's just engraved granite, but it's the same idea. They're flat to the ground, and they're easier to maintain because there's nothing sticking up, and the mower can go right across there. Now, what we have in front of us now is a standalone sarcophagus. This is a marble box, basically, and it contains the remains of one person. And it's just like a mausoleum, really, only it's just a single unit, and it's out on the cemetery, but the casket is placed, is inside of this box and sealed. And it's just a preference of some people to not have the body buried, but it's obviously sealed, so it has no effects on anything outside, and nothing outside can get into it. So this one is marble. It comes from 1959, but it's held up. It looks like it's held up very well. As I said, this cemetery is exceptionally well maintained, and they're very careful here. You'll see some cemeteries across the country that don't have that attention to detail, and you'll see some real wear and tear and downright breakage of some marble structures out there. But this one is done beautifully. So it's called a sarcophagus. One of the things that you'll find in a cemetery that has older burial spaces like Manteo Cemetery is you'll find that there was a period of time starting at the early part of the 20th century and going back 100 or so years where there was an awful lot of infant mortality, and you'll see a number of burial spaces for children who lived a day, a week, a month, a couple of months, maybe a couple of years, and there were a lot of illnesses that are now cured or preventable that were running rampant at that time, and you can see this evidenced in the high number of children buried in a cemetery from that period. Let's take a look at a couple. Here's an example of an infant monument that born March 16th, 1908, died March 23rd, so it lived a week, and was buried in this spot. Here we see a damaged monument, but we can see it says on the top infant, and must be the same date of death as birth, back in 1919. Right next door we have infant son of Beatrice and Caleb. Must again have been possibly a stillbirth, something like that. At that period of time, it was very common because a lot of children didn't make it into adulthood, and it's just part of history, and I look at it like that. This is a monument that has a person who was born in 1860, died in 1920, and it says, "A precious one from us is gone, a voice loved is stilled, a place is vacant in our home which never will be filled." Those are the kinds of little poems and things that you would see, aside from personalization, like the Masonic symbol and the guitar. But here, for example, we have a beautiful monument, and this person passed away in 1939. The epitaph is simple: "An honest man is the noblest work of God," and the Woodman of the World Memorial, which this was obviously a woodworker based on the design. See, this is a custom-made monument with logs carved out of marble, so it's really quite a creative monument, and this is the kind of thing that you would see frequently only 50 years or so ago, but still around in some places. Well, hopefully from our tour of Manteo Cemetery, you've gotten an idea of what's in a more traditional vintage cemetery. You've got deaths from 100, 200 years ago, and you have some that are recent. Cemeteries are a beautiful place to reflect and think about the impact that your loved one had on your life. Sometimes it's someone that you knew personally and recently, and sometimes it's an ancestor you may never have met, but it's an important part of your history. This is why we encourage you to rely on the funeral home that you've selected, and hopefully it's a good private family funeral home that has a long time in business in the community, because they will know the cemetery, they will know how it's maintained, because that's something that you can't undo later on. So we encourage you to do that. Thanks for being with me on this second installment of our new channel, and we encourage you to please like and subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell, and we'll let you know when we have something new. We appreciate you very much here at Twiford Funeral Home in Manteo, North Carolina, and up in Elizabeth City, North Carolina as well. Please feel free to contact us or leave a comment if there's a particular subject you would like to have addressed on this channel. Thanks for being with us. Check out our website also at twifordfh.com. Thanks.